I am Chloe, 38 years old, and until recently I was the most loyal office manager any company could ask for. 18 years I gave to that tech firm, watching it grow from a startup to an industry leader. What they did not know was that I owned the very building they operated from, inherited from my grandfather. I rented it to them at half the market rate out of loyalty. Then one Monday morning I was called to HR without warning. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you will understand exactly how I felt. Like and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned this betrayal into the sweetest revenge. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments. My journey with TechVision started when I was barely 20 years old. Fresh out of community college with an associate degree in business administration, I was eager to prove myself in the professional world. The company was tiny then, just 5 employees working out of what was essentially an oversized garage that my grandfather happened to own. Martin Reynolds, the founding CEO, took a chance on me despite my lack of experience. He hired me as a receptionist, but in a company that small, everyone wore multiple hats. Those early years were exhilarating. We worked long hours, often ordering pizza at midnight as we scrambled to meet client deadlines. I quickly learned every aspect of the business, from basic accounting to client relations. By my second year, I was handling office management, basic HR functions, and even helping with marketing materials. Martin noticed my dedication and promoted me to office manager when we hit 15 employees. As TechVision grew, so did my responsibilities. I coordinated our first office expansion, negotiated with vendors, and became the glue that held our operations together. When employees had problems, they came to me first. When clients visited, I made sure everything ran smoothly. Martin used to joke that I knew where all the bodies were buried, and in a way I did. I knew every password, every contract detail, and every office secret. My dedication went far beyond a normal 9-to-5 job. I canceled a vacation to Hawaii when our server crashed 2 hours before my flight. I worked through a nasty case of pneumonia during our biggest product launch. When Martin's wife had surgery, I organized meal deliveries for his family for 2 weeks. TechVision was not just my employer, it was my family. Martin treated me accordingly. Every year on my work anniversary, he took me to lunch at the same upscale restaurant and personally thanked me for another year of service. He invited me to his holiday parties and his children's graduations. When my mother was diagnosed with cancer 5 years into my tenure, he gave me flexible hours without hesitation so I could drive her to chemotherapy appointments. The company continued to flourish. We moved from 15 employees to 50, then to over 100. Our little garage startup transformed into a serious player in enterprise software. I helped manage that growth every step of the way, developing systems and protocols that scaled with our expansion. By our 10th anniversary, we had 150 employees spread across 3 departments, and I had a small team reporting to me. Then came the pivotal moment in my relationship with the company. 10 years ago, my grandfather passed away unexpectedly. He left me several properties, including the commercial building that TechVision had expanded into. I suddenly found myself as the company's landlord. The market rate for the space had tripled since they first moved in, but I never considered gouging them. Instead, I approached Martin with a proposal. I would continue renting the building to TechVision at well below market rate as long as I remained an employee. It seemed like a win-win. The company saved a fortune in rent, and I had job security while earning steady income from the property. Martin was incredibly grateful, calling my offer extraordinary loyalty. He assured me that as long as he was in charge, my position was secure. For 8 more years, everything continued smoothly. I renovated the building at my own expense, adding amenities that made it a more pleasant workplace. When we needed more space, I helped negotiate favorable terms for additional offices in adjacent buildings. My dual role as employee and landlord was hardly ever discussed. It was simply a beneficial arrangement for all involved. 2 years ago, however, everything changed. Martin announced his retirement. He was 67, had made his fortune, and wanted to travel with his wife while they were still healthy. The board brought in Richard Park, a Harvard MBA with an impressive resume of scaling tech companies. During the transition period, Martin personally introduced me to Richard, explaining our unique arrangement and emphasizing my importance to company operations. Richard seemed to understand. During his first 6 months, he frequently came to me with questions about company history, client relationships, and operational details. I spent hours helping him understand the company culture Martin had built, and he appeared appreciative. He even took me to lunch on my work anniversary, continuing Martin's tradition. I thought the transition was going better than expected. Looking back now, I should have noticed the subtle warning signs. Richard began implementing aggressive growth targets and cost-cutting initiatives simultaneously. Several long-time employees were let go during his first year, always with the same explanation: restructuring to meet our strategic objectives. Each time I felt a twinge of unease, but I reasoned that new leadership often meant changes. My position felt secure due to both my institutional knowledge and our building arrangement. I could not have been more wrong. The first real sign of trouble came 8 months into Richard's tenure. He announced the hiring of Amanda Fisher as our new director of operations. This was a brand new position that seemed to overlap significantly with my responsibilities. When I asked Richard about it during our weekly one-on-one meeting, he assured me this was not a replacement but an expansion of our leadership team to support our growth objectives. Amanda would focus on strategic operational planning, while I would continue managing day-to-day operations. It sounded reasonable enough, though a knot formed in my stomach. Amanda was 32, with perfectly highlighted hair and a wardrobe of designer suits. She had worked with Richard at his previous company and brought an MBA from Wharton. From day one, I tried to be welcoming, offering to show her around and explain our systems. Her response was cordial but distant. "Thanks, but I prefer to observe first and form my own impressions," she told me with a tight smile. "Richard has briefed me extensively." Within 2 weeks, Amanda began questioning my processes. "Why do we handle client onboarding this way?" she would ask during meetings. "This seems inefficient." When I explained the reasons, which often involved specific client needs I had learned over the years, she would nod without comment, then later suggest changes to Richard without consulting me. I began noticing I was being excluded from meetings I would normally attend. When I asked why, the explanation was always that they were strategic sessions that did not require operational input yet. Then I would discover decisions had been made that directly impacted my team, leaving me to implement changes I had no hand in creating. One Friday afternoon, about 3 months after Amanda's arrival, I overheard a conversation while walking past the break room. "The legacy employees are going to be the hardest to transition," Amanda was saying to someone, "especially those without technical skills." The conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed me. Amanda flashed that tight smile again. "Chloe, we were just discussing the transition to the new project management system." That weekend, I could barely sleep. Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Richard to discuss my concerns. His assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute slot. 3 days later, when I finally sat across from him, Richard seemed distracted, checking his phone several times during our brief conversation. "I feel like I am being sidelined," I told him directly. "Is there something about my performance that is unsatisfactory?" "Not at all, Chloe," Richard replied, finally putting down his phone. "But companies evolve. Amanda brings expertise in operational scaling that we need for our next phase. Your historical knowledge of the company remains valuable. We just need to modernize some processes." Before I could press further, he glanced at his watch. "I have to run to a board call. Let's continue this discussion soon." He never rescheduled. The following week, Amanda asked me to document all of my processes and responsibilities for continuity purposes. She wanted detailed guides for everything from vendor management to office emergency protocols. I spent hours creating these documents, increasingly certain I was building my own replacement manual, but trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. That month, Richard hosted a company dinner to celebrate a successful quarter. During his speech, he emphasized the importance of bringing in new blood and embracing modern approaches. He specifically thanked Amanda for her contributions to streamlining operations. My 18 years of service went unmentioned. Several longtime colleagues gave me sympathetic glances. They could see what was happening too. My anxiety increased when I discovered I had been removed from several email chains discussing office renovations, despite the fact that I owned the building. When I brought this up to Amanda, she seemed surprised. "Oh, that must have been an oversight. We are just in preliminary discussions anyway." But the final confirmation came when I arrived early one morning and found Amanda at my computer. She jumped slightly when I entered. The system was acting up, and I needed to retrieve a vendor contract, she explained. quickly returning to her own office. That afternoon, I checked my access logs and found that Amanda had been going through my files for weeks, focusing particularly on vendor contracts, the building lease, and employee records. When I confronted her, she became defensive. As director of operations, I need to understand all aspects of our business. I did not realize you would be territorial about company documents. These are not just company documents, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. Some of these relate to my personal property and the lease agreement. You mean the building? Amanda raised an eyebrow. Richard mentioned that arrangement. It is rather unusual mixing personal and business interests that way. But do not worry, we are just doing due diligence. That night I barely slept. The next morning I noticed my key card access had been restricted to regular business hours, only despite my occasional need to access the building on weekends. When I inquired with IT, they said the directive had come from upper management. For the next 2 weeks, I continued performing my duties while watching my authority being systematically dismantled. Tasks that had always been mine were reassigned. Decisions were made without my input. Longtime colleagues began treating me differently, some with pity, others with distance, as if my situation might be contagious. Despite the mounting evidence, I clung to hope. 18 years of loyalty had to count for something. The building arrangement made me valuable beyond my role. Martin had promised me security. I kept telling myself that this was temporary, that Richard would eventually recognize my worth. I was living in denial, and the wake-up call was just around the corner. The email arrived on a Monday morning at 8:15, meeting request, HR conference room, 9:30 a.m. The sender was Janet from Human Resources, copying Richard and Amanda. No agenda was specified. My stomach dropped immediately. After 18 years in business, I knew what this meant. Still, I spent the next hour trying to convince myself it could be about something else. Perhaps they wanted to discuss changes to my role. Maybe this was about the building lease. I arrived at the conference room 5 minutes early, my hands slightly shaking despite my efforts to appear calm. The room was empty, so I took a seat and waited, my mind racing through possible scenarios and responses. At precisely 9:30, the door opened and Richard walked in, followed by Amanda and Janet from HR. Their faces were carefully composed into neutral expressions. "Good morning, Chloe," Richard said, taking a seat across from me. He placed a folder on the table. "Thank you for joining us today." The formality of his tone confirmed my fears. This was no regular meeting. Janet cleared her throat. "Chloe, as you know, TechVision has been undergoing significant restructuring to position ourselves for future growth. As part of this ongoing process, we have been reviewing all departments and roles." I sat perfectly still, my face a mask of composure, while my heart hammered in my chest. After careful consideration, Janet continued, clearly reciting a rehearsed speech. "We have made the difficult decision to eliminate your position as part of our organizational restructuring." Even though I had suspected it was coming, hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. 18 years dismissed with a corporate euphemism. "Today will be your last day," Richard added, not quite meeting my eyes. "We have prepared a severance package that includes 2 months of salary and benefits continuation." 2 months. For 18 years of service. The insulting inadequacy of it momentarily left me speechless. "I do not understand," I finally said, proud that my voice remained steady. "I have been with this company since the beginning. I know every aspect of our operations. What restructuring could possibly require? Eliminating my role." Amanda shifted in her seat. "We are consolidating operational functions under a more streamlined organizational model. Many of your responsibilities will be absorbed by my department or redistributed among existing team members." The corporate speak was infuriating. They were not even giving me the courtesy of a straight answer. "And what about the building lease?" I asked, looking directly at Richard. "Did that factor into your decision?" Richard finally met my gaze. The lease arrangement was considered, of course, but business decisions must be based on organizational needs, not ancillary factors. "Ancillary factors," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call an arrangement that has saved the company millions in rent over the years?" Janet quickly interjected. We have a transition plan for the lease situation. We can discuss that separately from the employment matter. I laughed a short, bitter sound. They are not separate matters, they never have been. Martin understood that. Richard's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of his predecessor. Martin ran a different kind of company. We are positioning Tech Vision for the future. A future that does not include employees who have given 18 years of loyal service, I observed. Is 2 months severance standard for that length of employment? Janet looked uncomfortable. The package is consistent with our current policies. Current policies, I echoed. Not the policies that were in place when I was hired or when I offered below market rent for this building. Chloe, Richard said, his tone sharpening. This decision is final. We need to focus on the transition process now. He pushed the folder toward me. These documents outline the severance terms and include an NDA and non-disparagement clause. Our legal team can answer any questions. I did not touch the folder. What about my team, who will manage them? Amanda will oversee the transition, Richard replied. We will be communicating the changes to the staff after this meeting. So they had not even had the decency to let me tell my own team. I had trained some of these people from their first day. We will need you to return all company property, Janet said, pulling out a checklist. Your laptop, security badge, credit card, and all keys to the facilities. All keys, Richard emphasized, finally looking directly at me. We need all your keys. Something in his tone made it clear they feared I might retaliate because of the building. They wanted to ensure I could not access the premises once I left. I reached into my purse and removed my key ring. One by one, I placed each key on the table: the main entrance, the server room, the supply closet, the executive suite that I had been trusted with for emergencies. Each metallic clink against the conference table, marking the end of an era. Is there anything else you need from me? I asked, my voice hollow. Janet glanced at her checklist. We have arranged for security to escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. Your company email access will be terminated by the end of the meeting. Security escort. After 18 years, they thought I might steal office supplies, delete files. It was the final indignity. As if reading my thoughts, Richard added, This is standard procedure, Chloe. Not a reflection on you personally. Nothing about this felt standard. Nothing about it felt anything but deeply personal. A security guard was already waiting outside the conference room when we finished. Janet handed me the severance folder, which I took mechanically. As we walked to my desk, colleagues looked up, expressions of shock and sympathy on their faces as they realized what was happening. Some quickly looked away, embarrassed to witness my humiliation. Others gave me sad smiles or nods of solidarity. My desk, which had been my domain for nearly 2 decades, looked suddenly unfamiliar. The guard stood uncomfortably nearby as I robotically gathered photos, my coffee mug, a few books. Everything else, years of accumulated mementos, seemed suddenly meaningless. I packed a small box, acutely aware of the silence that had fallen over the usually bustling office. As I was about to leave, I saw Amanda already sitting at my desk going through my files. She did not even wait until I was out of the building. Our eyes met briefly and I saw something there. Perhaps a flicker of guilt quickly replaced by determination. She nodded slightly, then returned to the files. The security guard walked me to the front entrance. As we passed the reception area, the young receptionist I had hired and trained myself 3 years ago was crying quietly. She tried to hug me, but the guard stepped between us. Please, just escort Miss Meyer directly out, he said, following his instructions. Outside in the parking lot, I finally made it to my car before the tears came. 18 years ended in a 30-minute meeting. My hands shook so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. I sat there sobbing for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. As I finally drove away, I glanced back at the building, my building where I was now unwelcome. The beautiful red brick structure my grandfather had purchased in the 1970s, which I had maintained and improved, for a company I believed valued me. I had given them all my keys just as they asked. All of my keys. But they had forgotten that I had something much more valuable than keys. I had the lease. I spent the remainder of that day in a fog of disbelief and grief. When I arrived home, I mechanically fed my cat Apollo, who sensed my distress and stayed unusually close. I could not bring myself to open the severance folder. Instead, I sat on my couch staring blankly at the wall, replaying the meeting over and over in my mind, thinking of all the things I should have said. As evening fell, I finally roused myself enough to make a cup of tea. The simple routine helped restore a small sense of normalcy. I needed to think clearly. I needed to understand my options. My first impulse was to call Martin to tell him how his beloved company had treated me. But I hesitated. Martin had entrusted the company to Richard and stepped away completely. I did not want to burden him with this situation, especially since he might feel guilty for not protecting me better. Instead, I went to my home office and pulled out the large fireproof box where I kept my important documents. Inside were my birth certificate, social security card, passport, and a manila folder labeled grandfather's estate. I had not looked at these papers in years. There had been no need. I spread them across my desk, the deed to the building tax documents, and the original commercial lease agreement between my grandfather and Techvision, which had been transferred to me upon his death. The lease was thick with legal language, much of which I only vaguely understood. I began reading carefully, looking for anything that might protect me in this situation. On page 17, I found what I was looking for. Section 23. Paragraph 4. Termination of lease. This lease may be terminated by either lessor or lessee, with 60 days written notice. There were further clauses about default and breach of contract, but this was the critical part. The lease required 60 days' notice from either party. I leaned back in my chair, the implications slowly dawning on me. Techvision had not given notice. They had fired me, but they had not terminated the lease. Legally, they were still my tenants, but I was no longer their employee. The agreement Martin and I had about reduced rent was predicated on my employment with the company. Now that relationship was severed. My mind began racing with possibilities. I could raise the rent to market rate. I could find a new tenant. Or I could evict them. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Could I actually do that? Force out a company of 150 people? Where would they go? What about my former colleagues, many of whom were my friends? It seemed extreme vindictive even. Yet something hardened inside me when I remembered Richard's dismissive tone, Amanda's calculating gaze, the humiliation of being escorted out by security. They had treated 18 years of loyalty as disposable. They had reduced my life's work to an organizational restructuring. I pulled out my laptop and began researching commercial real estate in our area. What I found astonished me. Due to the tech boom in our city, commercial rents had skyrocketed even more than I had realized. Techvision was paying less than a third of current market rates for prime office space. No wonder Richard had assured me they had a transition plan for the lease. They knew exactly how valuable the arrangement was. I dug deeper into commercial tenant laws in our state. As I suspected, commercial tenants had far fewer protections than residential ones. Property owners had considerable leeway in setting terms and enforcing agreements. I would need to provide proper notice, but beyond that, the law was largely on my side. Still, I hesitated. This was a major decision that would affect many people. I needed expert advice. I remembered that my friend Jessica from college had become a real estate attorney. We were not as close as we once were, but we still met for lunch a couple of times a year. I sent her a text asking if she was available for a consultation the next day. She replied almost immediately, concerned about my unusual request, but agreed to see me at 11. I slept fitfully that night, my dreams filled with conference rooms and keys and Amanda sitting at my desk. I woke early, exhausted, but determined to understand my options fully before making any decisions. Jessica's law office was in a sleek downtown building. Her assistant showed me in immediately, and Jessica rose from behind her desk to hug me. "Chloe, what is going on? You look terrible." I explained the situation, trying to stick to the facts without letting my emotions overwhelm me. Jessica listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she asked to see the lease agreement which I had brought with me. She read through it methodically, occasionally asking questions about the history of the arrangement and any verbal agreements with Martin or Richard. After about 20 minutes, she looked up from the documents. "Well, legally speaking, your position is quite strong," she said. "The lease is independent of your employment despite any verbal understandings you had with Martin. Since you were terminated without cause, and there was an implicit connection between your employment and the rental arrangement, you would be justified in reverting to market rate rent, or even terminating the lease with proper notice. So I could evict them, I asked. You could provide 60 days' notice requiring them to vacate, yes, she confirmed. Legally, that is your right. But Chloe, she leaned forward. Have you thought about the practical implications? This could get messy. They might sue claiming there was an implied longer-term agreement. They would probably lose, but it could be expensive and stressful. They already gave me stress, I said, my voice hardening. They already delivered the ultimate professional insult. What more could they take from me? Jessica sighed. Just be sure, this is what you really want. Revenge can feel satisfying in the moment, but hollow in the long run. I appreciated her concern, but the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. This was not just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about showing Richard and Amanda that actions have consequences. That loyalty once betrayed cannot be taken for granted. What if they offered to reinstate me, I asked, though I doubted they would. That would be a negotiation, Jessica replied. You would be in a position of power, able to set terms. But ask yourself if you truly want to work for people who have shown they do not value you. She was right. Even if they offered me my job back, the trust was irrevocably broken. I could never again feel secure in that environment, waiting for the next betrayal. I need time to think, I told her. Jessica nodded. Whatever you decide, I can help you with the legal documentation. Just let me know. I spent that evening walking through my neighborhood trying to clear my head. Apollo trotted alongside me on his leash, stopping occasionally to investigate interesting scents. The familiar routine calmed me, and gradually my path forward became clear. Martin had always taught me that business was about relationships and integrity. Richard and Amanda had violated both principles. They had every right to reorganize the company as they saw fit, but the callous way they had discarded me after 18 years of service revealed their true character. People who would treat a loyal employee that way did not deserve the benefits of my generosity. When I returned home, I sat down at my computer and began drafting an eviction notice. Jessica had provided me with a template, and I filled in the details, setting the vacation date at exactly 60 days from tomorrow, the maximum required by law. I was careful to keep the language professional and legally precise without any hint of emotion or vindictiveness. I printed 3 copies on heavy bond paper and signed each one. As I slipped them into envelopes, I felt a curious mixture of dread and satisfaction. Part of me still questioned if this was the right decision. Was I being petty? Would I regret this escalation? But then I remembered Amanda sitting at my desk before I had even left the building. I remembered Richard's refusal to look me in the eye. I remembered 18 years reduced to a restructuring and a paltry 2-month severance. No, they had made their choice. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. The next morning, I dressed carefully in a professional outfit as if going to work. I drove to my building, and parked across the street. I watched employees, my former colleagues, entering for the day, carrying coffee cups and backpacks, unaware of the bombshell I was about to drop. I waited until 9:30, when I knew Richard typically arrived, then walked confidently to the front entrance. The security guard, looking uncomfortable, stopped me. I am sorry, Miss Meyer, but I cannot let you in without authorization. I am not here as an employee, I said calmly. I am here as the owner of this building to deliver an important legal document to the current tenants. The guard looked confused but stepped aside. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. Chloe, it is so good to see you. Everyone has been talking about what happened. It is not right. Thank you, Megan, I said. I need to deliver this to Richard, Amanda, and the legal department. Can you make sure they receive them? She looked at the envelopes in my hand and seemed to understand the significance. Of course, I will make sure they get them right away. I handed her the envelopes, feeling a strange sense of closure. Thank you. Take care of yourself. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in days. I had no idea how Richard would react, but for the first time since being fired, I felt in control of my destiny again. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. The call came exactly 2 hours later. I was at my kitchen table updating my resume and browsing job listings when my phone lit up with Richard's name. I watched it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Richard," I said calmly. "What the hell is this?" he demanded without preamble, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I assume you are referring to the eviction notice," I replied. "Eviction notice." He practically spat the words. "This has to be a joke. You cannot evict an entire company out of spite." "It is not spite, Richard. It is business. You terminated my employment, which nullifies our verbal agreement about the reduced rent. As the building owner, I am exercising my right to terminate the lease with 60 days' notice, as clearly stated in Section 23, Paragraph 4 of our agreement." "This is completely unprofessional," he said. "Do you have any idea of the disruption this would cause? We have 150 employees." I could not help but laugh. "Unprofessional. You fired me after 18 years with no warning, had me escorted out by security, and gave me 2 months' severance. And you want to lecture me about professionalism. That was a business decision," he insisted. "As is this," I countered. There was a moment of silence before Richard's tone changed, becoming more conciliatory. "Look, Chloe, perhaps we acted hastily. Your institutional knowledge is valuable. We could discuss bringing you back in a consulting capacity." So predictable. Now that I had leverage, suddenly I was valuable again. "I am not interested in consulting," I said. "The 60-day notice stands." "We will fight this legally," he threatened. "We will claim there was an implied long-term arrangement. You will spend a fortune in legal fees." "Feel free to try," I responded, grateful for Jessica's preparation. "But the written lease is quite clear. You might want to check with your legal team before making threats." I heard him exhale sharply. "Name your price," he said finally. "What do you want? Double the rent, your job back? Both?" "I do not want anything from you, Richard. The notice period gives you 60 days to find new accommodations for your business. I suggest you start looking immediately. Commercial space is very tight in our area right now." "This is insane," he muttered. "You are willing to displace 150 people because you are angry about losing your job." "I did not displace anyone," I corrected him. "You made a business decision to terminate a loyal employee. I am making a business decision regarding my property. Actions have consequences." "Martin would never have approved of this," Richard said, attempting one last angle. "Martin would never have fired someone who had given 18 years of loyal service with a security escort and 2 months' severance," I replied. "But he is retired now, and we are both free to make our own decisions." The call ended shortly after, with Richard promising this was not over. I had no doubt he would try other tactics, but Jessica had assured me my legal position was solid. Throughout the day, my phone lit up with texts and calls from former colleagues who had heard about the eviction notice. Most were supportive, even celebratory. "You go, girl," texted Diane from accounting. "About time someone stood up to these corporate vultures," wrote James from IT. A few expressed concern about their own situations, but no one blamed me directly. Amanda tried calling twice, but I let the calls go to voicemail. Her messages were a strange mix of conciliation and subtle threats, suggesting we could find a mutually beneficial resolution, while hinting at potential reputational damage I might suffer. I deleted them without responding. The most surprising call came 3 days later from Bethany, Richard's executive assistant. "Richard does not know I am calling," she said in a hushed voice. "But I thought you should know they have been planning this for months. Amanda was hired specifically to take over your role. They waited until after the quarterly reports were filed because they needed your expertise to complete them." This confirmation of my suspicions stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. "Thank you for telling me, Bethany," I said. "Be careful." "I have already updated my resume," she replied. "This place has changed." A week after delivering the eviction notice, I received a formal letter from TechVision's legal department requesting a meeting to discuss options regarding the building lease. I forwarded it to Jessica, who advised me to agree to the meeting, but to bring her along as my legal representation. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at Jessica's office. TechVision sent their chief legal counsel, a stern woman named Patricia, along with Richard, and surprisingly Amanda. Jessica and I sat across from them, calm and prepared. Patricia opened with a lengthy argument about implied contracts and detrimental reliance, suggesting that TechVision had made business decisions based on an understanding that their lease arrangement was secure. Jessica calmly pointed out that any such understanding was contingent on my continued employment, which the company had chosen to terminate. When the legal arguments failed to gain traction, Richard shifted strategies. "Chloe, we are prepared to offer you your position back with a 10% raise and a formal 3-year contract." "No, thank you," I replied without hesitation. "We could also agree to a new lease at market rates," Amanda suggested. "We are willing to pay fair value for the space." "I have other plans for the building," I said, though in truth I had not yet decided what I would do with it. Richard looked incredulous. "You would rather leave it vacant than lease to us at market rate. That makes no business sense." "Neither did firing your most knowledgeable employee after 18 years, I countered. "Yet here we are." The meeting ended in a stalemate. As they were gathering their things to leave, Amanda hung back. "This is not personal for us," she said quietly. "It never was." I looked at her directly. "That is the problem. It should have been. 18 years should have made it personal." Over the next several weeks, I received regular updates from my former colleagues about the company's frantic search for new office space. Commercial vacancy in our area was below 2%, and the few available spaces were either much smaller than what they needed or significantly more expensive. According to my sources, Richard had teams looking at spaces in 3 neighboring cities, all of which would mean lengthy commutes for current employees. Meanwhile, I was moving forward with my own life. The severance would cover my expenses for a short while, and the building would soon be available for a new tenant at current market rates, which would significantly increase my income. I began exploring new career opportunities, reconnecting with industry contacts, and even considering starting my own business consulting firm. 4 weeks into the 60-day notice period, I received a call I never expected. It was Martin. "Chloe," he said, his familiar voice sending a wave of emotion through me. "I just heard what happened. I have been traveling in New Zealand completely off the grid. I am so sorry." "It is not your fault," I assured him, though hearing his voice made me realize how much I had wanted his support. "In a way it is," he sighed. "I chose Richard. I thought he understood our company culture, the value of loyalty. Clearly, I was wrong." We talked for almost an hour. Martin explained that several longtime employees had reached out to him about both my firing and the subsequent eviction notice. He was dismayed by the changes at the company he had built. "For what it is worth," he said, "I think you are completely justified. They broke faith with you. The building arrangement was always predicated on mutual loyalty and respect." His validation meant more than I could express. "What will happen to the company?" I asked. "I never wanted to destroy what we built together." "TechVision will survive," Martin said. "They will find new space, probably pay 3 times what they were paying you, and learn an expensive lesson about the true cost of discarding loyal employees. Richard may even keep his job, though I have heard the board is not pleased with this situation." As the 60-day mark approached, I drove by the building, occasionally observing moving trucks and employees carrying boxes. According to my sources, they had finally secured new office space, a collection of 3 smaller buildings in a business park about 20 miles away. The rent was triple what they had been paying me, and the spaces needed significant renovation to meet their needs. A week before the final move-out date, Richard requested one last meeting. We met at a coffee shop midway between our homes. He looked tired, the strain of the past weeks evident in the dark circles under his eyes. "You won," he said, simply stirring his untouched coffee. "It was never about winning," I replied. "It was about consequences." Richard nodded slowly. "I understand that now. For what it is worth, I made a mistake. I let Amanda convince me that your role was redundant, that we needed new blood. She was very persuasive about the efficiency gains we could achieve." "And how is that working out?" I could not resist asking. He grimaced. 3 key clients have left, citing confusion during the transition. Our new office space is costing us a fortune. And Amanda quit yesterday for a position at a competitor. I felt no satisfaction at his admission, only a sad confirmation of what I had already known. Their decision had been short-sighted and ultimately self-defeating. "I am sorry it came to this," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I had spent 18 years helping build TechVision. Its failures were painful to witness even now. Would you consider? Richard began, but I shook my head. No, that chapter is closed, but I wish you and the company well truly. On the final day of the notice period, I stood across the street and watched as the last of the Tech Vision signs were removed from my building. Employees loaded the final boxes into cars and said their goodbyes in the parking lot. Many were facing longer commutes or had chosen to resign rather than relocate. The company I had helped build for 18 years was fundamentally changed. As I observed this bittersweet moment, I received an email from a commercial real estate agent I had contacted. A promising startup called Green Tech was looking for office space exactly the size of my building. They had a solid business plan, secure funding, and a commitment to employee well-being that reminded me of the early days of Tech Vision. I responded immediately, setting up a meeting for the following day. Perhaps this building, which had witnessed so much of my professional life, could become home to a company that truly valued its people. Maybe something good could emerge from this painful chapter after all. The meeting with Green Tech exceeded my expectations. The founders, Sarah and Michael, were passionate about their sustainable energy solutions and had a clear vision for creating a positive workplace culture. They were shocked when I explained why the building was suddenly available and assured me they took a very different approach to employee relations. We believe a company is only as strong as its people, Sarah said. Long-term employees are assets, not expenses to be cut. Their offer was fair at current market rate, but with reasonable terms for both parties. I found myself drawn to their enthusiasm and principles reminiscent of Tech Vision in its early days. Before finalizing any agreement, however, I had to meet with Tech Vision's lawyers for the official lease termination. Jessica accompanied me to the meeting at their new office space, which was clearly still under renovation. Exposed wires hung from the ceiling, and the sound of drilling echoed from nearby rooms. Patricia, their legal counsel, reviewed the final paperwork with us. Everything appears to be in order, she said, her tone professional but cool. Once you sign these documents, Tech Vision officially relinquishes all claims to the property at 812 Maple Avenue. As we completed the paperwork, Richard appeared in the doorway. Chloe, could I speak with you privately before you leave? Jessica gave me a questioning look, but I nodded. It is fine. I will meet you in the lobby. Richard led me to a small office, one of the few that appeared finished in the new space. I wanted to apologize officially, he said, closing the door. My handling of your termination was inexcusable. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. What you may not know, he said, looking uncomfortable, is that Amanda had been pushing for your removal since her first week. She convinced me you were resistant to change, that your methods were outdated. She presented a compelling case about cost savings and efficiency improvements that would result from restructuring your department. And you believed her without question, I observed. Without considering my 18 years of institutional knowledge or contributions to the company. Richard nodded. It was poor judgment on my part. I was so focused on impressing the board with cost-cutting measures that I lost sight of the human element. He paused. The irony is that your eviction has cost us far more than we could have ever saved by eliminating your position. Actions have consequences, I said simply. Indeed they do, he agreed. The board has placed me on probation. The disruption and additional expenses have erased our profit margin for the quarter. And as you may have heard, Amanda resigned as soon as the difficulty of the transition became apparent. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a sense that justice had been served. I hope the company recovers, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I did not wish failure on the business I had helped build or on the many good people still working there. We will, Richard said, but we will have learned an expensive lesson in the process. He hesitated, then added, Martin called me. This surprised me. What did he say? That I had fundamentally misunderstood what made Tech Vision successful all these years. That it was not just clever products or marketing strategies, but the loyalty and institutional knowledge of key employees like you. Richard looked genuinely regretful. He was right. As I prepared to leave, Richard asked one final question. What will happen to the building now? I am leasing it to a promising startup, I told him. One that understands the value of its employees. The irony was not lost on him. Full circle, he murmured. Walking out of Tech Vision's new offices, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also closure. The company that had been my professional home for 18 years was now firmly in my past. It was time to look forward. The next day, I finalized the lease with GreenTech. The terms were favorable to both parties, and they were eager to move in as soon as possible. As I showed Sarah and Michael around the building, I found myself sharing stories about the space, its history, and the many improvements I had made over the years. "You really love this building, do not you?" Sarah observed. "I do," I admitted. "My grandfather bought it, believing it would be a good investment. He never could have imagined how central it would become to my life." "Would you consider joining us?" Michael asked, unexpectedly. "We could use someone with your experience and knowledge of the building. We are looking for an operations director." The offer caught me off guard. I had been so focused on resolving the situation with TechVision that I had not given much thought to my next professional step. "Let me think about it," I said. "It is an intriguing possibility." That evening, I received another surprise call from Martin. "Chloe, I am back in town. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? I would love to catch up properly." We met at our old favorite restaurant, the same place he used to take me for work anniversaries. Martin looked tanned and relaxed from his travels, but his eyes were serious as we settled into our booth. "I want to apologize again," he said after we had ordered. "I feel responsible for what happened. I chose Richard as my successor, and I failed to adequately protect you in the transition." "You could not have known how things would turn out," I assured him. "Perhaps not," he conceded. "But I should have formalized our arrangement about the building. A verbal understanding between us was one thing, but I should have anticipated that new management might not honor it in the same way." We spent the next hour catching up, discussing the eviction drama and its aftermath. Martin was saddened, but not surprised by the changes at TechVision. "The company was your baby," I said. "It must be difficult to see it go in a direction you did not intend." Martin smiled wryly. "Every parent eventually has to let their children make their own mistakes, but I admit this one has been painful to watch." As we finished our meal, Martin surprised me with an unexpected question. "Have you ever thought about starting your own company?" I laughed. "It has crossed my mind recently, actually. Why do you ask?" "Because I have been considering a new venture," he said, leaning forward. "Something smaller, more focused with the kind of culture we built in the early days of TechVision. And I could use a partner who understands operations inside and out." I stared at him, processing this unexpected proposal. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he nodded. "Nothing too ambitious, mind you. I am still technically retired, but a boutique consulting firm, perhaps. With your operational expertise and my industry connections, we could build something special. And we would only work with companies that share our values about treating employees right." The idea was immediately appealing. Working with Martin again, building something from the ground up, but this time as a partner rather than an employee. Having a direct say in company culture and values. "I would need to think about it," I said, though I was already feeling excited by the possibility. "I actually received a job offer today as well, from the new tenants in my building." "Of course," Martin nodded. "Take your time. The offer remains open." In the weeks that followed, I carefully considered both opportunities. GreenTech was promising with their commitment to sustainability and positive culture. But Martin's proposal offered something more: partnership autonomy and the chance to directly shape a company's values. Meanwhile, the final act in the TechVision drama played out. Richard was ultimately removed as CEO, with the board citing the costly mishandling of key operational transitions. Amanda's departure for a competitor resulted in a lawsuit when it was discovered she had taken proprietary information with her. And several longtime employees reached out to me about joining whatever new venture I decided to pursue. 60 days after TechVision vacated my building, GreenTech moved in. I had declined their job offer but negotiated favorable lease terms that included first rights to additional space as they expanded. They were already bringing positive energy to the building, installing solar panels and renovating with sustainable materials. As for me, I accepted Martin's partnership proposal. We established Reynolds Meyer Consulting, specializing in helping growing companies scale their operations while maintaining positive workplace culture. Our first office was a small suite in my building, leased from me to our new company at fair market value, with everything properly documented in writing. Our firm quickly gained a reputation for integrity and results. Several former TechVision employees joined us, bringing their talents to a workplace that truly valued them. And I found that being a business owner rather than an employee brought a level of security and satisfaction I had never experienced before. One day, about 6 months after the eviction, I ran into Amanda at a coffee shop downtown. She had lost her job at the competitor when her lawsuit with TechVision became public. She looked away quickly when she saw me gathering her things to leave. "Amanda," I called, surprising myself. "You do not need to go." She approached my table hesitantly. "I would not blame you if you wanted me to," she said. "It is all in the past now," I replied, realizing I truly meant it. The anger and hurt had faded, replaced by appreciation for where the difficult journey had led me. "For what it is worth," she said, "I regret how things happened. I was so focused on advancing my career that I did not consider the human cost." "We all make mistakes," I said. "The important thing is learning from them." She nodded, looking genuinely chastened. "I certainly learned from this one. No job is worth compromising your integrity." After she left, I sat thinking about the extraordinary chain of events that had unfolded from that fateful meeting in the HR conference room. Being fired after 18 years had seemed like the end of the world. Instead, it had become the catalyst for a new beginning, one with more security, satisfaction, and control than I had ever imagined possible. The building my grandfather had left me, which had played such a central role in my professional life, now housed 2 thriving businesses with positive workplace cultures. The keys that Richard had so insistently demanded had become symbolic of a power. I had not realized I possessed the power to stand up for myself, to demand fair treatment, and to create something new from the ashes of betrayal. They had fired me after 18 years of loyalty. I had evicted them from the building they depended on. But the true justice was not in the eviction itself, but in what grew from it: a new career, a new company, and a new appreciation for my own worth that could never be taken away. 6 months turned into a year, and the painful memories of my final days at TechVision gradually faded into the background of my increasingly fulfilling new life. Reynolds Meyer Consulting had grown to a team of 15 occupying the entire top floor of my building. We were selective about our clients, working only with companies that demonstrated a genuine commitment to ethical business practices and employee well-being. The severance package that had seemed so insultingly inadequate now sat untouched in an investment account. Between the fair market rent from Green Tech, who occupied the lower floors of the building, and my income from our consulting firm, I was more financially secure than I had ever been as an employee. But the most valuable change was not financial. It was the profound shift in how I viewed myself and my work. No longer was I defining my worth through loyalty to someone else's company. Instead, I was building something that reflected my own values alongside a partner who shared them. Martin and I had established clear boundaries from the beginning. Our partnership agreement, meticulously documented and reviewed by Jessica, specified everything from profit sharing to decision-making protocols. We had learned our lesson about relying on verbal understandings, no matter how well-intentioned. "We make quite a team," Martin observed one evening as we celebrated landing a major new client. "I keep thinking about how differently things might have turned out if you had just accepted your firing without pushing back." "I almost did," I admitted. For the first day or two, I was too shocked and hurt to think clearly. Finding that lease agreement was the turning point. "The universe works in mysterious ways," Martin said, raising his glass. "To the best revenge, living well." Our business model proved successful beyond our initial projections. We specialized in helping mid-sized companies scale their operations without losing the human touch that made them special. Our client list grew steadily, often through word of mouth from satisfied customers. One particularly rewarding project involved helping a family-owned manufacturing business implement new technologies while preserving the company culture that had sustained them for 3 generations. The owner, a man in his 60s, reminded me of my grandfather with his practical wisdom and genuine concern for his employees. "Most consultants just tell us to cut staff and maximize short-term profits," he told me. "You are the first ones who really understood what makes us special." Those moments of connection and impact gave me a sense of purpose I had never quite achieved at TechVision, even during my best years there. Green Tech was thriving as well. Their innovative energy solutions were gaining traction in the market, and they had already expanded to occupy 3/4 of the building. Sarah and Michael frequently invited me to their company events, and I watched with satisfaction as they built the kind of workplace culture I had always valued, one employee at a time. Not everything was smooth sailing, of course. Running my own business brought new stresses and challenges. There were difficult clients' cash flow concerns during our early months, and the constant pressure of knowing that our employees now depended on Martin and me for their livelihoods. But these challenges felt fundamentally different from the insecurity of being an employee. They were problems to solve, not threats to my identity or security. About 15 months after starting our firm, I received an unexpected email from Richard. He had landed at a smaller tech company across the country and wanted to hire our consulting firm. I learned valuable lessons from our previous interaction, he wrote. My new company could benefit from your expertise in building sustainable operational systems and a positive workplace culture. I discussed it with Martin, who left the decision entirely to me. After careful consideration, I declined the opportunity. It was not out of lingering resentment, but because I doubted Richard's sincerity about changing his approach to leadership. Some bridges once burned should stay crossed. Instead, we continued focusing on clients who genuinely shared our values. Our reputation grew, and so did our team. Several of my former colleagues from TechVision eventually joined us, bringing valuable skills and institutional knowledge. Each time we hired someone new, I made sure they understood our commitment to treating employees with respect and dignity, even during difficult business decisions. "We will never ask for all your keys" became an inside joke during our onboarding process, though new employees did not know its origin. On a crisp fall morning almost 2 years after my firing, I found myself at my favorite coffee shop, reviewing quarterly reports when someone called my name. I looked up to see Amanda standing beside my table, looking hesitant. "Do you mind if I join you for a moment?" she asked. I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about what she wanted. The last time we had spoken was that brief, awkward encounter 6 months after the eviction. "I heard your consulting firm is doing well," she said, setting down her coffee. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied. "What about you? Have you found a new position?" Amanda smiled ruefully. "Not in tech. The lawsuit with TechVision made me something of a liability. I am teaching business ethics at the community college now." I could not help but laugh at the irony. "Business ethics? Really?" "I know," she acknowledged. "But sometimes the best teachers are those who have made the worst mistakes. I use my experience as a case study in what not to do." Despite everything, I had to admire her resilience and adaptability. That is actually impressive. Most people would not have the courage to transform their failures so publicly. "I had good motivation," she said. "After everything fell apart, I had a lot of time to reflect on the choices I made. The drive to succeed at any cost, the willingness to undermine others, the focus on short-term gains over long-term relationships. None of it led to lasting success or happiness." We talked for almost an hour. Amanda had genuinely changed, finding meaning in helping young business students understand the real-world consequences of ethical shortcuts. She even asked if I would guest lecture in her class, sometimes sharing my perspective on the importance of employee loyalty and fair treatment. "I would be happy to," I told her, realizing I genuinely meant it. It is an important message. As we parted, Amanda said something that stayed with me. "You know, you could have been much more vindictive if you wanted to. You had the power to truly destroy the company, to publicly shame everyone involved. Instead, you just stood your ground and moved forward. I have always respected that." Her words made me reflect on the choices I had made during that difficult time. The eviction had felt like righteous revenge in the moment, but its true value had been in freeing me to discover a better path forward. Had I remained consumed by bitterness and the desire for retribution, I might have missed the opportunities that emerged from that painful transition. Later that week, I had dinner with Martin and his wife Claire at their home. As we enjoyed Claire's famous apple pie for dessert, Martin raised his glass in a toast. "To 2 years of Reynolds Meyer Consulting," he said, "and to the firing that made it all possible." Claire looked confused. "You are toasting the fact that Chloe got fired. That seems odd." "It is not that I am glad it happened the way it did," Martin explained. "It is that we can now see the blessing that came disguised as a curse. Sometimes the worst experiences lead to the best outcomes. I thought about that idea as I drove home that night. The firing that had seemed so devastating had ultimately liberated me from a situation that was no longer serving my best interests. The building that had tied me to TechVision had become the foundation of my new, more fulfilling career. Even the betrayal I had experienced had taught me valuable lessons about documenting agreements and recognizing my own worth. The most profound change was internal. I no longer defined myself by my loyalty to an employer or my willingness to sacrifice for a company's benefit. Instead, I had learned to value myself, to stand up for fair treatment, and to create the kind of workplace I had always wanted to be part of. 2 years and 3 months after that fateful day in the HR conference room, I stood before the team at Reynolds Meyer Consulting during our annual retreat. We had grown to 25 employees, all of whom shared our commitment to ethical business practices and mutual respect. When I started this journey, I told them I thought the most important thing was loyalty. I gave 18 years to a company that ultimately did not value that loyalty. But what I have learned since then is that the most important thing is not blind loyalty, but mutual respect and integrity. That is what we are building here together, a company where everyone is valued not just for what they contribute, but for who they are. As I looked at the faces of our team, I felt a sense of peace and purpose that far outweighed the bitterness I had once carried. The keys that Richard had demanded back had unlocked a door to a new life I could never have imagined while sitting at my desk at TechVision. Being fired after 18 years had seemed like an ending, but it had actually been just the beginning. The building that had been at the center of the conflict now housed 2 thriving businesses built on mutual respect and shared values. The eviction that had felt like sweet revenge had actually been the first step toward healing and growth. And the person who had once defined herself by her loyalty to someone else's company now stood confidently as the co-creator of her own destiny. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes our most painful experiences become the catalysts for our greatest transformations. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and redemption. And remember, your worth is never defined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to turn your own setbacks into comebacks.